Welcome to this very special edition of RDBA Facebook Live. Retail RDNs rise in the ranks during the pandemic. The ability to pivot in a crisis is a fundamental leadership skill. And during the Corona-19 pandemic, retail dietitians have shown their agility and their ability to quickly adapt to new situations and responsibilities. But at the same time, this crisis with retail on the front lines has elevated the importance of retail dietitians' role at retail, giving individuals the opportunity to rise in the ranks. With me is Executive Director of RDBA, Annette Maggi, with Kara Behlke, Director of Health and Wellness Strategy at Schnuck Market, and Mikala, Guillaume, RD and Health and Wellness Strategy Planning at HEB. Welcome, all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Phil.
So, I think that this webcast is very important, and it's the first webcast we've been doing at RDBA, and I think we're going to do a lot more because what we really want to learn is what other retailers and what retail dietitians should be. As all of you know, since RDBA started now, like 8 years ago, Annette, since we
Yeah,
started
8 years.
this.
Yep.
Yeah. I've always said that, what I want as one of our objectives is to have an RD as the CEO of a supermarket.
Mm-hmm.
I think what we now are seeing is the next phase of that is the RD as the chief health officer of a supermarket and rising that way and creating that. So to that end, we want to share a lot of different ideas here. It's a conversation. Please type in your questions on our Facebook Live page. I'll be moderating those and asking as we go. So we're going to go for about 30, 40 minutes. Make sure you get your questions in and we will address those in real time versus waiting till the end. So Annette, can you get us started?
Yeah, thanks, Phil, and thanks, Kara and Mikala, for being here with us today. Kind of giving your expertise. Obviously, we know the retail area is front lines, and we know that retailers across the board have been doing everything they can to meet consumers' need for food. But would love to hear from you guys to talk a little bit about how have you seen your shoppers' interest in health and wellness shifting kind of during the coronavirus pandemic?
I'll go ahead. I think it's been really interesting to see that shift where, in the first few weeks, it was, a bit of panic buying, stocking up. So you really saw people going for those comfort foods because obviously in a time of uncertainty, we want some comfort, some control. And so watching customers stock up, whether it's on frozen pizzas, getting canned foods and just preparing for like the unknown was really, what we saw a lot in the first few weeks. And so I think that interest in health is, on their physical health. And I think people are more aware than ever because every day you're asking yourself, how am I feeling? Do I have symptoms? How's my family feeling? So I think that conversation where when we get in the day-to-day grind, you're not thinking about, oh, how am I feeling? But every day you're thinking about it. And also I've seen a huge interest, not just the physical health, obviously, because you're checking for the absence of disease or the presence of disease, but also emotional health. And I've always, as a retail dietitian, strive the importance of well-being and not just health and wellness, but overall well-being. And so that involves social well-being, mental well-being. And I think, it's okay to talk about it during this crisis. Like, hey, you might have feelings that you're not used to. And if you feel that, it's okay to talk to someone. And just letting people know, and customers done a lot of just telling them about resources that I'm aware of, just because some people maybe have never experienced this for the first time. They're like, whoa, what's this feeling? And just letting them know, hey, you're not alone. No one is absent from it. Bill?
So Kara, let me ask you a question. Based on what you said, our eating habits have changed partly because of what's on the shelf. People are switching things. I was talking to somebody who's a health and wellness extremist, who I know real well, who eats like 12 grain bread only and things like that. And I was saying, what did you have for breakfast this morning? And she told me Oreos. So I guess the question that I have for all three of you is, with people eating at home, with people eating more comfort foods, Kara, as you pointed out, think back when you went to college and everybody was talking about the freshman 15.
Right.
Are we going to see the COVID-19 where people are going to be gaining weight, 19 pounds? It's just a number. It's a cute phrase. And how are you as retail dietitians going to be dealing with people who have this immediate weight gain and changing their habits back.
Mhm.
Something we've discussed. Mikala, if you want to start off, I'll let you jump in. But
So to clarify your question, are you asking around like how retailers ourselves are going to respond to this potential like weight management conversation, or?
Sure. Yeah. Let's go broader. Let's talk about retailers in general and then specific to retail dietitians.
Right. So I think, right now you see kind of two behaviors from a consumer standpoint. You have folks that are kind of thriving at home and have figured out this like new routine. It may feel like a slower pace of life. And so I think there's a lot of like streaming and fitness and group classes and a lot of like freebie offerings. I think that's somewhat of a silver lining from this experience. But I think the folks who are really struggling, to kind of dig into your question, I think if we can inspire and make it really, really easier to leverage the foods that they are cooking at home, I think they'll be really successful.
And how are you doing that? How are you leveraging that? Are you using social media? Are you using Facebook? What are you doing?
Well, and I know, Annette, you're good friends with Stacey Bates. We have this beautiful resource, our nutrition services program. We have about, I think, 60 dietitians now that are able to work one-on-one with folks and really dig into that personal weight management piece.
So are they still in store working one-on-one?
We're doing telehealth. So luckily,
Got it.
the dietitian team had that platform available. And so it's been an easy transition all online. And I think, the speed of adoption from a telehealth perspective is something that will be long-term after this pandemic.
I think your point though, Phil, and maybe we call it the COVID-15, you know what I'm saying?
No, I like the COVID-19.
Right. Well, yeah, let's call it the COVID-19. But when you think about it, like when flour was disappearing from the shelf and yeast was disappearing from the shelf, so it was like everybody was baking bread and everybody was baking. And so to your point about weight gain, I think it's a real issue for people of, people aren't eating out, but they're eating all their meals at home. And they're also eating a lot of baked goods and just more bread and those kinds of things. So I do think it's an interesting dynamic. Yeah.
Still going on. I looked at the Nielsen data from last week, and baking powder and baking yeast are still in the top 5 increases, 400 or 500%. And also I looked on e-commerce sales. This goes across Walmart, Amazon, and so on. The number 2 selling product of all products is bread making machine.
Bread makers.
Yeah. Yep.
So and you're dead on.
It's a combination of things, right? Because you want that comfort, but also, how do you keep the kids busy? You have new routines, you're snacking more because you're not used to working from home. There's more food around, you're stocking up. So you have a stockpile of food, like a few feet away. And, there's just so many reasons, but we've talked about this a lot because again, in the beginning, it was all about safety and, and stocking up and that comfort. And now, people are talking about, well, I don't want to come out of this, gaining weight or looking like Sasquatch because I haven't taken care of myself. I haven't done my hair. So I think there's a lot of focus because it's like, okay, if we come out of this during summer, it's swimsuit season. So a lot of, people have that on their mind, and we've kind of shifted some of our media and some of our messaging so that it is more relevant. And I think that's the challenge through all this that, dietitians have to keep in mind, like your message has to stay relevant to the current times. So some of the stuff that we're talking about is, healthy snacking and trying to, front load that to the front of the month where it's relevant because, later in the month, it could completely change because each day there's something different each week, as we've seen. But that's definitely something, people are thinking about, and how can they boost their immunity? And then what about the second wave of COVID when we all, when people start coming back and interacting and we miss that social interaction? But it's like, how can I build my immunity and strength now so that like when we do go back to work that I can continue to fight it? So, and again, in the first part, when we saw, there wasn't a lot of like fresh produce being sold, when I was in stores watching at the check lanes. But now, you start to see that coming back. And I'm hopeful that as more people cook from home, they can, lean into those foods that are high in nutrition that will help, set them up for, a healthier immunity.
Well, Kara, it's interesting when you talk about produce too. I think I was talking to the Coburn's dietitians, and they were saying carrots and potatoes had gone off the shelf early in the game because they were more not shelf stable, but less perishable, right?
Yep.
And so even in produce, consumers and shoppers were shifting their behavior. They weren't necessarily buying berries, but they were buying those items in produce they thought would last longer.
But,
right.
And also that high touch experience as well. So if you think about, I live in Texas, and people, when we are kind of checking the avocados and purchasing, there's a lot of touching. It's a very like high sensory, experience. And I think that that's playing into fear of the virus,
So two things. Number one, if we look at immunity, to Kara's point, citrus is probably number one. And what we saw, again, from Nielsen data, is in the beginning of it, we really saw a lot more sales of oranges and grapefruit and so on. Oranges still has an increase of 63.3%.
Wow.
Over last year, but it's declining. So are we now getting a little bit more complacent? And I know, Kara, you said you were out of stock on that. And what are we doing? What do we need to be doing? I guess that's the right question. What do we need to be doing to remind people that probably one of the most important things to fight any virus, any flu, is to build up our immunity?
Well, and some of the things that we're doing, at least we've done for teammates, and as well as externally doing a media segment. And again, it's all those things for immunity. So not just what you're eating, but how much you're sleeping, and are you keeping hydrated? And so just reinforcing those messages, what we've been doing is just, again, eating a wide variety of fruits and vegetables and nutrient-dense foods, taking a multivitamin with antioxidants if you think you need it as a backup plan, making sure you get plenty of sleep, shoot for 8 hours, giving people apps to help them monitor their sleep, track it, meditation, mindfulness, encouraging people to reach out to friends and family. So all these things impact your immune system and your immunity. So it's not just one thing. And obviously eating well, getting probiotics, I've got my daily kombucha that I've been drinking, vitamin C, things that I do. But, I just like to remind people that it's holistic and it's not just oranges. There's other things that are high in vitamin C, and you got to look out for all aspects, of your health if you want to, really fight any type of disease.
So Annette, I'd like to start with you on another question. Throughout what we've seen over the past 8 weeks or so, it appears, and correct me if I'm wrong, that science is evolving. We're learning more every day, whether it's from briefings of governors or White Houses. Some information is conflicting, but it seems that science has been evolving. How can the retail dietitians help their retailers, and what I mean by their retailers are their bosses, senior management, understand the science, number one, because it is complicated and is conflicting, and then a lot of CEOs are now, retailer CEOs are now doing TV commercials. So does the retail dietitian, or should the retail dietitian, play a role in telling them how to communicate this to not confuse consumers? So Annette, let me start with you, and then Kara and Mikala, love your opinion on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, Phil, I think it's a really interesting opportunity for retail dietitians. Dietitians are often the science-minded individual within the retail company, right? And the science has evolved. Continually, we see new information coming out and guideline switching. And so it's easy for leadership to be confused and to say, what's the right messaging for our shopper? What's the right messaging, right, for our employees? And I've seen a lot of retail dietitians step up into the role of really being that health advisor on some of these things, not only in saying, here's in helping their leadership understand the science, but also in helping them say, okay, here's kind of the bland messaging from the CDC that's very science driven, but how do we flip this and communicate this appropriately to our shopper? And I think, Kara, even you and I have had some conversations about what do you choose to educate your shopper on or communicate to the shopper versus what do you say is not really within the purview of your retailer. But yeah, Mikala, I mean, how are you guys approaching this area? I mean, are you seeing your dietitians step up to be showing kind of leadership in this area of helping others in the company understand the science?
Yeah, I think we're really lucky. Our leadership does a great job of really surrounding themselves with science-minded health experts. So we have our pharmacists, we have our dietitians, we have our like chief medical officer, all playing a part of messaging and kind of that go-to source.
And Kara, are your senior managers reaching out to you, listening to you? Are you helping guiding those messages besides just what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, for all the retail dietitians listening in, that's where you build strong relationships within marketing and communications, because they're the ones who, during this time, they're writing all of the press releases, they're drafting the talking points. And so if you're the one that they come to during crisis, like, you can make sure that, you're a good resource for them. So even, it's hard during amidst a crisis to develop those relationships. So that's why it's important, you do it when times are good and just being that resource and contact for them. So during these times, yes, when we're making videos before marketing is, launching any type of PSA or commercial out there, just reviewing it to make sure that, that nutrition, what we're saying is factual, and the same with, communications and being part of, a resource for them. And I would say, as far as like reviewing the research, one thing that I did, just to kind of be an advocate, is just looking at like other emergency health situations to see like, okay, looking at the peer reviewed research, looking that up and understanding like, okay, what effect is this going to have on our business and our teammates for the short term? Because there's a lot of information out there on H1N1 and SARS to see like, this is the first time that retail has been on the front line, and having, most dietitians have worked in a hospital before, but most retailers haven't. So understanding like, hey, we have to operate differently, and like, these are the long-term effects. So, looking at peer-reviewed research to help us say, hey, what's going to happen, 3 months, 6 months, the fatigue, the burnout, like all of those things. When this ends, what is it going to look like? So that was one thing that I always advocated for.
So I want to ask you both a question. Is this an opportunity? We talk a lot at RDBA, as everybody knows, about the business side of things. Right. Is this the opportunity, Kara, as you described, that now you have people that are maybe listening to you a little bit more than they did, 2 months ago? Is this the opportunity for RDs to really step up and command the space and the power that you guys deserve?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely think it is. I think you have to have that foundation in place to have, to start having those conversations, and they're going to come to you during this time. And as far as conversations with the executive teams throughout this, it's health and wellness is going to be even more important coming out of this than it was before. And I think that's probably a question that many people listening had, is like, hey, things are uncertain. What's going to happen to my program when everything settles and things come back to a new normal? And at least for me, at our organization, we were focused on business critical, and I'm sure many dietitians were doing things that, they weren't previous, but a lot of the work that I was doing before, people came to me and wanted, to continue. They want that work. They want health and wellness to be bigger and better, because they want something for people to look forward to. And they know this isn't going away. People are going to continue to care about their health and their safety. So there's partnerships with food safety, communications, marketing, and they want to be that person, because we are here for our customers. We've been through this with them. They trust us now. Like, we want to continue to innovate and provide them resources. So the conversations I've had is, more than ever, because of the foundation that, we've created at Schnucks, they want to continue to elevate that message and get it out there. So it's not going away, for sure.
Mikala, what's going on with you guys?
Well, health and wellness is top of mind with HEB. And I think, you've brought up Nielsen, Mintel, like all of the consumer insights for the industry say that our customers really are paying attention to their health and wellness, whether that looks like self-care. Kara, you brought up mental health, something as simple as washing your face, putting makeup on for the day. People are even in survival mode, or with the amount of uncertainty. are resorting to. And I think health and wellness is definitely top of mind for my retailer.
So Annette, from a 30,000 square foot, well, not square foot, 30,000 foot level, or square foot, what should retail dietitians be doing right now to get a seat at the table, to do what Kara is doing, to do what the HEB dietitians are doing, to get in front of the C-suite and not only get in front of it, but stay there when this is done and become that, chief health officer, if you would?
Well, one thing I think, Phil, and I think a lot of retail dietitians have done this well, is they pivoted, right? And so you can't do in-store activations anymore. So how do you reach the consumer, and how do you go to the consumer with what's relevant right now? So parents are struggling right now with families home 3 meals a day. And so their dietitians are doing social media segments and videos on batch cooking, on easy snacking, on science experiments with food you can do with your kids, so they've really pivoted to meet the current need. And I think that is something that retail generally is good at, but retail dietitians are showing their agility. I think even more importantly, you have to be a person who is offering your guidance to indicate that you understand the science and understand how to communicate that science. I have a quote at my desk and I use it in some of my presentations, but I think it applies in this situation of it's think like a wise man, but communicate in the language of the people. And I think that's what dietitians are good at in this situation, of saying, this is complicated. Science is evolving. Things are shifting. I mean, Kara, you and I had some conversations about all the madness that suddenly arose in a 2-week span of time about washing produce with bleach and detergent. And it's like, whoa, all these dietitians are saying, stop, porous, fruits and vegetables are porous, don't do that. So I think that ability to rise to the occasion and to really leverage that science input, but most importantly, that ability to communicate to the consumer and educate the consumer and to showcase that ability to translate the science is a great opportunity today for retail dietitians.
I'd like to go back to something that Mikala said about produce, that people are fearful when they see, people squeezing limes, and I want the best lime and so on. What's fascinating to me, and I've spent a lot of time in Italy and in France and in those supermarkets, there, the produce departments actually have plastic gloves for the consumer, for the shopper, when they pick their produce. So they're not touching it with their hands. Is this something, I'd like all three of your opinion, is this something that we all should be doing? Is that going to be part of the new normal?
It's so interesting, all of the hygiene and sanitation shifts that we're seeing. I know I've seen a few pretty funny memes where it has all the people in produce, and when we normally maybe lick our finger to open up the produce bag.
Yes, I do that.
Oh God, I don't know how to.
I have to do it. I have to do it.
Yeah. So I think we're all really hyper aware of how many touches, or even touching our face, and I think it will impact the new normal, whatever that may be. Whether it's gloves and produce, I don't know. That's a good idea though.
Do you think we're going to see, I'm sorry, Kara, do you think we'll see more bagged produce? That's what I wonder. So do you do, 3 limes in a little bag? But I think avocados, Mikala, to your point, is challenging, because sometimes you want hard ones, sometimes you want soft. And
right.
Well, if you remember when Tesco came over here, which was a disaster, one of the reasons that everybody said it was a disaster is every piece of produce was individually wrapped. So you would walk into the produce department and every apple had plastic around it, every banana had plastic around it, and so on. And they really came down hard on them, saying that was the first thing the consumers would see, and it was a turnoff to come into those stores. So I don't know if we're going to see, individually wrapped. I think we will see gloves, and I think we will see, to your point, more prepackaged produce. And Kara, what do you think?
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about operations wise, a lot of things that we're doing different now, from the plexiglass to the decals to cashless to no reusable bags, all of these things. just thinking about what is going to stick. And, you know, in traditional retail, you know, you're too busy operating to stop and think about this, but this has forced us to stop and operate differently and know that we can, you know, still stay in business and service our customers and support our teammates. So I think, you know, many of these things that maybe we've thought about before, we actually, you know, and we thought about testing, now we're forced to, and we know, oh, hey, we can operate in a whole new way. So I think there will be, you know, lots of changes to operations and how, you know, retailers show up after this. And the other thing is going to add, we recently purchased a natural food store. So Schnuck's is expanding. And when we look at like a bulk food section, the way it existed pre-COVID, what is that going to look like? Our customers going to come back to the bulk foods, you know, to, you know, how does our deli change? How does our bakery? So it'll be really interesting to see, you know, customer response. And that's something that I think, to your point earlier, talking about how dietitians get a seat at that table. If you're not thinking about what your program looks like the next month, 3 months, 6, 9 months, you should be, you know, thinking about that and being part of those conversations to let, you know, the retailer know, like, hey, here's the customer's evolving needs. This is how health and wellness plays a part, because all the plans will be changing. Things will look very different. You know, your business, overall business priorities and strategies might change, but be that person that can be there and help support like the evolving customer needs. Because again, we know health people are going to be concerned with it, and they're going to want, you know, they're going to have a different expectation of their grocery store.
Yeah.
To add to your point, Kara, sorry.
I just want to go to some of our questions too. And then I'll let you continue. Jessica Patel, a member of RDBA, asked, it'll be interesting to see what produce packaging may do to all of the sustainability initiatives out there.
Yes.
Commitments to plastic reductions and so on. What do the three of you think about that? In fact, let me again talk about Nielsen. Nielsen did a global survey, and what they have found is people are moving away from eco-friendly soaps and detergents and so on. Now they want the petrochemical stuff that they know is going to kill everything. So what do the three of you have to say about, Jessica? What is all this produce packaging going to do to sustainability initiatives, if anything?
I think people define and prioritize differently some of the various definitions that you could label sustainability. I've seen a shift towards like food waste, you know, people really monitoring, you know, limiting the amount of food waste that they have, especially being at home. I know that there's probably some guilt with our customers around the disposable, you know, one and done kind of household essentials, or the amount of plastic waste. I think maybe packaging would be a good solution in exploring the less packaging options that may exist out there, you know.
Well, Lindy says she was just thinking the same thing. If these new initiatives stay long-term, we will be seeing even more waste than we already are. So she's in total agreement with what you guys are saying.
Phil, the interesting thing to me about this topic, so Kara, you know, and Phil, you know, I have a 21-year-old in my house. And so that generation is so aware of single-use plastics. And, you know, my son is always on us. Like, if we're going to use a Ziploc bag for a loaf of banana bread in the house, he's like, why can't you use a Tupperware container, you know? And so I do think that generation, this is going to be a huge struggle for them of where their values are placed from, because I think they're super conscious about the safety right now. Like, I think some of the young adults in that generation are social distancing better than the rest of us. So I think this is a challenge for some of those younger generations of their values in this. But safety.
I agree. Let me go back to another question. Kate McGowan asks, hi, Kate. What are you telling brands who want to be part of the solution, but not seen as capitalizing on the uncertainty? Are branded promotions still happening? Not encouraging foot traffic to stores? Do retail RDs want to be receiving info from brands? Some great questions. I'll just take the first one. The promotions are down considerably. Some retailers have even cut it out. One of the reasons has been that, frankly, they don't know what they're going to have on the shelves. So it's hard to do a circular or a promotion 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks out if you don't know what's on the shelves. Number one. I'll do the other points to you. To the three of you, are branded, not encouraging foot traffic to stores. Do retail RDs want to be receiving info from brands? Kara, do you want to hear from a brand right now?
A few weeks ago, unfortunately, I would have had to say no because it was business critical and we were getting so many emails and things were changing. You're developing, you're part of HR policies and helping food service that, there was just no additional capacity beyond business critical. I would say now, what we've seen as, it's slowed down a bit and we've found a whole new way of operating because we've implemented so many safety measures for our customers and teammates that, it's obviously still busy, but we've found a new way of operating. So I would say in the coming weeks, you can start to reach out. And coming out of this, dietitians are going to want to do campaigns that resonate with customers. It may not be like we were talking about in August. We do a huge back to school program that you guys are familiar with, but kids might not, what if kids aren't going back to school? Is that the right message? Can you spend and talk about kids cook, it's kids cooking with kids. So I think my advice for Kate and any other brands is you're gonna have to think different and like what is relevant and put yourself in the dietitian shoes and say, okay, what are they gonna need, come August, September, October, what do the holidays look like, and help us, secure that health and wellness message with our customers.
And just to build on that for a second, shameless plug, RDBA, Sample Fest, everything that we do, we can help you get to retail dietitians as well.
Absolutely. You guys are a great resource, and a great way that I've built my contacts and a lot of the promotions we've done at Schnuck's is through RDBA and all the resources. So absolutely, if people are listening and not working with you guys, I recommend they start.
And let me go back to Lindy. We've been trying to incorporate brands into our social media videos, and they're looking for more. So, Lindy, do we know what retailer?
She's at Wise Markets, I think.
Okay.
I think so. She can confirm, but.
Okay. Yeah. So Lindy, just send me a note if you're at Wise. And Dana asked, are you seeing a shift towards or away from health foods such as milk alternatives and plant-based meats? Every time I go to the store, dairy, meat, and eggs are sold out or limited. What trends are you seeing? Mikala, why don't you start with that?
Some trends around meat?
Well, are people shifting away from healthier foods?
I think the pantry looks so different than most folks are really used to. I think they are finding a lot of like maybe substitutes if they opted in for curbside because they were doing their part in social distancing. I know that, before all this started, we were talking about the meat and supply chain conversation right now. I think a lot of folks have their family at home, and that impacts the way that the table and their plate may look. So health foods, I don't think have decreased, but I do think that people are buying in bulk and maybe managing through some of the shortages that exist today.
I'd like to ask the last question. If you do have some questions, put them up. We'll take one or two more questions on Facebook. But I'd like to really just start with you, Kara, and then Mikala, and then Annette. What do you see as the long-term impact of this pandemic on retail healthy living programs and the role of the retail RD? I mean, we've talked a little bit about that, but close it up. What is this whole industry, meaning retail dietitians, look like at the end of the pandemic?
For me, I see, there's going to be big opportunities for health and wellness within, our retailer and most retailers to be there to support customers as they come back to this new normal. So yeah, I think, during this, throughout, like, it's unfortunate, the changes that have been made, but I think there's going to be big opportunities for dietitians. And what we're focused on is just how can we simplify health and wellness, because we know it's complicated. And we've seen during COVID, there's so much information out there, and it's like you choose one news source and you try to stick with it, because if you're to listen to everything in social media and Facebook, and it can be overwhelming for your mental health. And so how can we be that one trusted source? And people do, like our retailers, or what I've seen in retail, having worked other places, is that they do trust us because, we're that family owned business. We're the place that they come. We know their kids. Like, they trust us to do the right thing. And if it's good enough for us, put on the shelf, it's good enough for them to buy. So I think leverage that trust, leverage the increased attention in health and wellness, and then simplify it. We don't need to, communicate every single attribute of every product. We as the retailers and the dietitians need to take back that health narrative and simplify it. So if you only had to make one good decision today, and that meant shopping at Schnuck's, well, we just suddenly made your life a little easier and hopefully a little healthier. So,
well, I would if you brought, a Schnuck's to Santa Monica. I would shop there. I would shop there.
Phil, we'll let you know. We're coming to the city.
Mikala, what do you see as the long-term implications?
So just thinking about that, I would divide it up into kind of two categories. So internally, I think, we've talked about like mission critical work. Everyone had their heads down, like all hands in. And I think that because dietitians are so dynamic, we can really step into any non-traditional support roles for our procurement teams, and whatever that may be. So I'm grateful for moments like that where it really is building relationships and just showing that we're team players, even though we come from a science and health background. From a customer perspective, I think there's going to be so many what ifs. I would love to see a long-term shift in a few things, cooking at home being one of them. I think that family table, or just building more confidence, depending on who it is in the kitchen, will be kind of neat to see. And then being a catalyst for mental health and opening the conversation there, and kind of giving permission for retailers to support the mental well-being for customers. And then digital health. I think there's a huge play from a telehealth, there's been some really cool like remote triage and whatnot. So yeah, I think there's a few silver linings that we'll see long term.
Annette,
I think Mikala, your point about telehealth is interesting because I had a conversation today with a retail dietitian colleague at Trader Joe's, and Trader Joe's historically has been kind of anti-work at home, and I think some of these things but now everybody's working at home. So people go, oh, it can work. It's the same thing about telehealth, right? It's like, oh, we were unsure about it, but now we've been forced to do it, so we can prove it can work. And so I think that's a really interesting point about some of this and what will come out of it. From my perspective, Phil, I think the consumers' interest in health and wellness as a broad topic, health and well-being and food safety, is heightened. I think fear drives a lot of things in people. And I think people see control of what they eat, of how they take care of themselves, as a way that they can potentially lessen their impact long-term even of coronavirus, but also extending to just their general well-being. So I think it's a great opportunity for retail dietitians. I think it expands the opportunity. I think supplements are going to grow. We're seeing heightened sales of supplements, which there's an article in the RDBA newsletter tomorrow about, which is a new added opportunity area for dietitians. But stress, mindfulness, all of those things play into that.
So Marilyn Mills from Hannaford is going to get the last question. So Marilyn said just yesterday, one of her meat associates actually was asking her to push plant-based as they can't keep hamburger in stock. I find that many customers are not flexible with their eating habits. So Marilyn, thank you for that. Thank you all for our first, not last, RDBA webcast. You were all great, very insightful. To our viewers, we will be posting this right here on RDBA's Facebook page. If one of your peers, one of your associates wasn't able to make it, please send them the link. It'll also be on the RDBA website. Again, that's retaildietitians.com. And be safe, be happy, and be healthy.
Thanks, you guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.